one at a time, and we're going to start with Spencer Holbrook. Go ahead.
Ryan, when you watch back over how Julian performed on Saturday, what were your takeaways? Did he grade out as a champion, and what did you learn about him in his first start?
Yeah, he did. He graded out over 80%. His adjusted completion percentage with a few drops was pretty good. So we felt like he took care of the ball, made some good throws. You know, I'd like to think that if we had made a few plays for him earlier on in the game, you know, maybe it would have gone a different direction. But I don't think he ever flinched. So good start. A lot of football to go, though.
We'll go in the front row, Dave Biddle.
We were so busy asking you about quarterback battle and everything else. I don't think we asked you enough about the running back situation. Obviously, both CJ and James were going to play. You talked about that, but I thought James would be the starter and CJ would be the backup. What did CJ do to kind of earn that starting job?
Yeah, no, they're working together, and you know we're going to need them both just like last year, and so you know we'll continue to do that, and you know, I think James had 10 carries, and CJ, I'm not if he had more than that, but I mean we're gonna break it up and you know kind of let Locke roll those guys, but you could probably see James getting more carries this week, and then maybe CJ more the next week. That's just kind of how it goes. And it was the same way with you know with Travion and Quinshon last year, and I think I looked, you know, I think Travion only carried the ball more than 10 times, like twice last year. So, you know, we got a long way to go, and we're gonna need all these guys.
Going to back, Dan Holt, 11 Warriors.
Yeah, Kenyatta left the game on Saturdays. Any update on his health going into this week?
Yeah, no, you know, real update other than you know, he is working towards getting back to play this game.
Going to the front row, Austin Ward.
Right, I know that you never want to disrespect any opponents, but with Texas now in the past, it seemed like training camp was all designed towards winning an opener. With what you have with the next two opponents, then the off week, is there any way that you may or may not tweak practices to treat this like training camp, rotate games? How does this schedule and the way week one went for you change the next couple of weeks at all?
Yeah, well, I think to your point, that was the focus, and now we got to grow. We got a lot of work to do, a ton. You know, after you come down from the emotion of the game, you get back on the film and you get to work. You just realize that there's so many things that we got to improve on, and that's what the focus is going to be, regardless of the opponent. And you're going to hear the coach speak of it always is about us, but that is true. I mean, we're holding ourselves to a high standard. I think coming out of the game, we were able to build some confidence, and I think we're able to build some confidence moving forward with some guys who hadn't played a whole bunch of football. Looking back on last year's team, that starting 22, I think, had almost 700 total starts under their belt. And so when you have a bunch of guys coming in who don't have that same experience, it's different. And so I think coming out of that game, they realize they can play with anybody in the country. That being said, it is a long season. There are so many corrections that need to be made. There's a lot of improvements that have to happen in all three phases. And so, that's going to be the thing as we get back to work here. We got a team meeting at 2:30. We're going to get into our game week routine because leading up to the first game typically isn't always like a game week routine. So a lot of things to work on. And again, when you have guys who are a little bit more inexperienced, who haven't done it before, now, okay, we've won a game, but now we have to get into a routine and start bringing it every week and the consistency of what comes with that. Because again, our goal is to play all the way through January.
Second row, middle, Bill
Ryan, the first fourth down play where Julian threw it to Max and Max dropped it, Jeremiah was open. It seemed like he had three guys open on that play, and then you talked with him a little bit after that play. I'm just curious about like the feedback you got from Julian on that play and throughout the game, and what you thought of like what he was seeing and what you were seeing.
Yeah, I thought the design was right there. I think what you want to do with a young quarterback, sort of in his first start and his first big spot right there on fourth down, is what did you see? And he said he felt the backside safety sort of running to the middle of the field. Back on film, you see him sort of running over the top on Max. Made a ton of sense to me. The fact that he thought he was running to the middle of the field in a single high look. And then, he got his feet, quickened up his feet, and put the ball on Max. It was towards the sideline, so maybe we would have liked it a little bit sooner. He was really selling the action, you could tell. So maybe, had another step or two in the fake that he could have snapped around a little bit faster, which would allow him maybe to see it a little better. But I thought he threw a heck of a ball. I mean, this is, his first start ever. We got to help him out. And it's good to see he and Max connect on a pass later on. But it was a good route by Max. Jeremiah was flying. I thought the design was right. And we're trying to be aggressive early in the game. And, you hit that, who knows what happens. But that's a game of football. You got to, move on, which I thought we did and he did. But when you ask him, what did you see? And you get something that makes a lot of sense, especially when you're looking at the iPad, that helps. I do think for a young quarterback, having that iPad and actually watching the film on what you actually saw and then comparing it to what was on the film does confirm some things in your mind where in the past, you wouldn't know what that looked like until you actually got on the film the next day or after the game. So I think we use that to our advantage in this game.
You used the word with Brian after the game about his play calling that it was unselfish. As a coach, when do you kind of notice that in your career you learned to coach unselfish? And how important is it to realize that you may not be able to dictate a game and that you used the mantra just win last week? Like, we may have to get away from our game plan and 14 might have to be enough.
Yeah, I can't sit up and say to you guys that the number one goal is to just win. If it's 14-7, we have to be really, really excited about that. I think, in college football and, before there was the playoff system, but even still now and just being, in a place like Ohio State, there's certain things that, there's quote unquote, the look test and style points, which is a pretty dangerous place to go sometimes because the number one goal is to win. And if you get too worried about that, that can cost you a game. And so, especially in a game like this, the number one thing was to win the game. We wanted to establish an identity in terms of playing physical. I think you saw that. I think guys played hard in this game. I thought there was a physicality to the game. The execution's got to improve. We need to be more explosive on offense for sure. And I think you have to try to identify in the game what you're dealing with. And I think that, for me, is important. I do think, the last drive when it was 14-7, I do think at that point, we need to be a little bit more aggressive right there. That first run didn't quite hit right, and then, they played man on second down and kind of hemmed us up, and then we're in third and long, which is bad, especially with an incompletion right there. So, I liked everything we did. I'm a part of that, so I'm being self-critical. That last drive, we got to go win the game in that moment. That being said, you got a young quarterback, so you got to keep all those things in mind. But at the end of the day, you just got to win the game and then move on and grow from there. But we know where we need to go, what we need to do, and so that's where we're going to work today.
Fourth row goal, Patrick Murphy.
Ryan, you talked before the game about how many times you'd sort of envisioned this game in your mind. How much did it play out like you thought, and how much maybe does what you thought before the game sort of dictate what you did during the game, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think if we felt like we were getting off the field on defense and playing good defensively, we wanted to limit the possessions that they had, which I think we did. Certainly that long drive, we ate 8 minutes off the clock. They used to say that like time of possession is one of the most overrated statistics. So not really, not when you're in a game like that and you're trying to keep, a really good offense off the field and really good players. Once you get into halftime, that's kind of when you start to figure out, all right, where are we? We're up by 7. We feel like we're playing good on defense. We are getting some movement, up front. We're playing physical on offense. At some point we're gonna have to take a shot or two, and then see what happens there in the first 4 minutes of the third quarter. Didn't like the way we played in the first 4 minutes of the third quarter. We can do better there. There's a lot of things that we can execute better, and if we do, again, the game can change real fast. I thought we won. We talk about the middle 8. We won those first 4 minutes, but we didn't win those second 4 minutes. So we deferred, and we got the ball to start the second half, and I thought we could have done better there. So going back through the film, a lot of corrections we need to make to get better. And again, that's all great lessons to learn coming out of a win against an opponent like that. But nonetheless, the issues are still there.
Go to the left, Joe Nugent.
On the touchdown pass, what did you make of the effort by Will Kazmarek? It looked like he had his hands full, but certainly got the job done.
Yeah, that wasn't the only play that he had where he was playing really physical in this game. Will has really established himself as a really strong in line on the ball tight end, and you've seen him make some plays down the field catching the ball, and so that room is strong. You can see we played with multiple tight ends in this game, and whether it's he or Bennett Christian or Jelani Thurman, Max Clare, Nate Roberts, we feel like we have some guys that we can build some different groupings out of, and that gives us a little bit of a change up there. So, but yeah, the strain on that play by a bunch of guys was critical. The guys up front, Will in particular, and then just Carnell coming back. And we talk a lot about those deep balls and the type of receivers we have is, the more air you put on the ball, the more margin of error you allow the receiver to come back and make a play or get a PI. When you throw a flat ball there, you got to be on the money, and you got to be exact. And when we're in those one-on-one situations, we've got to give our guys a chance. So we got to put air on it. We got to give them a chance to go get it. Feel free to get out in front of them, make a great ball. But if you do and you miss a little bit underneath, these guys have a chance to make a play. It's exactly what happened. And for Carnell to make that spot in that moment was big for us, and certainly allowed us to go up by 2 scores and give us a little bit of room in the game.
Ryan, you've talked a lot in the last month and a half about identity of this team, and I wonder if the Texas game is such an anomaly because of the long lead-in time and what comes after it. Do you feel any closer to knowing what the identity of this team is?
Yeah, I think the first thing is what we talked about in preseason was the competitiveness, the grittiness. I think you saw that on Saturday, the way that our guys competed. I thought the way that we fought in the trenches. I thought the way that we tackled. I thought the way we blocked. I thought the way we ran. You could see all that, and that's a great start. Was it all perfect? No. Do we need to play even harder? Yes. The execution, the details, the fundamentals, we got miles to go. It's not going to be good enough to where we need to go. But that's certainly something to build off of. And if that's going to be our identity, then we're going to have a chance.
Were you surprised by the defensive execution as clean? I mean, from our vantage point, it was pretty clean for a season opener. Was it installing a new defense, new defense coordinator, all the other changes? Was that a surprise to you?
Well, I think it was a very well thought out plan, but these weren't all of a sudden brand new coverages. There's only so many coverages you can play. You can play 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, there's only a few of them. And when you're talking about great coaches like Tim Walton, Matt Guerreri, James Laurinaitis, Larry Johnson, I mean, these guys know our players and they know how to coach. So, when Matt comes in and kind of, has some wrinkles and different thoughts on how we want to attack it, they all work together in there. Now, that sounds great, but the players have to go put it on the field. And I think that's where the credit really needs to go. I mean, certainly it was a great plan, and you got to give our coaches a lot of credit, but to see a guy like Jermaine Matthews, and he was all over the ball. There's a lot of great defenses out there, but you got to go put it on the field. And a guy like Caleb Downs organizing and talking and communicating and making sure guys are in the right spots. The guys up front fighting their tail off. Arvell and Sonny filling the holes, Peyton Pierce. So, but all that being said, we get done with this film, and there's just so many things to correct. So, but that's week 1. With some young guys. But I think the thing that I was impressed with about the defense and the offense was what we saw in practice showed up in the game. That doesn't always happen, but it did here. And the more I thought about it, I think about the recruits who were at the game. I think about the fact that some of these young players were with us for those 2 weeks in the Cotton Bowl and the national championship. The transfers who came in were with us. So although, and the guys who were in the program who maybe weren't starting, but they were getting a lot of reps, they were able to see what it was like. They saw the preparation, they saw the stage, and they obviously visualized themselves in a stage like that. And then the first game, to see that translate to the field was a good sign, because it doesn't always happen that way.
Jalen McClain looked like he had a terrific game. He was in the battle, obviously, with Malik. What would you want to say about his performance and what kind of impact he can make?
Yeah, an excellent start. I think he works well with Caleb. I think that Caleb's helped him build his confidence at a young age. He's a good tackler. He sees things. He plays downhill. He's fast. Makes good decisions. Plays on special teams at a high level. So he's got a bright future ahead of him and a real good start and a big spot right there because, again, like you said, there's a guy that maybe people aren't talking about a bunch, but he hadn't started. He hadn't played a whole bunch of football. Maybe he had one start, but not many. And, again, to play against that style of an offense early on, that's got to build confidence going into the rest of the season. So we're going to need him. He's going to be a big part of this thing.
Coach, the saying goes you make the most improvement from week 1 to week 2. Do you subscribe to that? And what's at the top of the list this week?
Well, I think the reason why people say that is what we were talking about last week, which is you make certain assumptions about players, about what it's going to look like, and then you get into the game and you figure out if your assumptions were accurate. There were a lot of things that were what we thought they were going to be, but then a lot of things that didn't happen. So we've got to get better at those. And when you play against a matchup opponent like that, you find out. You get to see on a punt return a guy competing against a really good player across the ball, and there's just a lot of things there. So we got to clean some things up on special teams for sure. We have to fundamentally just across the board. We've got to get better. We have to continue to work on sustaining high levels of play throughout the game. We have to attack the football on defense and create more and more turnovers. On offense, we need to be more explosive. We need to get to the second level and make guys miss, or get to the second level and block them on the perimeter. We need to, space out the passing game. I could give you a list a mile long of things we need to improve on. So. But we got it, and that's what the focus is going to be this week.
Coach, the offensive line didn't allow a sack, and they gave Julian a lot of time against good defensive front. How did those guys grade out, and how would you assess their performance?
Yeah, I looked across the field before the game, and that is a good-looking front. And I thought for Austin starting, at left tackle, Phil right tackle. I thought Carson, Luke, the guys. I thought they played well. Was there some inconsistencies? Yeah. Was there some looks that they gave us that we weren't prepared for? Yes, for sure. I thought they had a good game plan coming in and did a nice job. But I thought if you just watched our play, you watched how hard we played, there's something that we can build off of. And I think watching their reaction after we scored the touchdown on 4th and 1, watching the way they were finishing plays downfield, there's a grittiness to that group that, again, is a great foundation.
Second row middle,
Ryan, NFL season starts this week with NIL and rev share and all the ways that players can make money now. How much does NFL development and their chances to make money at the next level factor into recruiting still? And how do you feel you guys are doing in the NFL development part of this program?
Yeah, I think when you look at the development of our team, I won't compare it to other programs, but I'd put it up against anybody in the country because not only it's one thing to make it to the NFL, it's another thing to stay in the NFL. And that, to me, is where we've done a great job here. And, it's Coach Mick, it's our program, it's our schedule, it's Ohio State. It's playing on the stage. It's understanding how you handle yourself. There's just a certain level of expectation here in terms of performance on the field, how you handle yourself off the field, not, staying out late and running the streets after a game. Like, we got to get to bed. We got a long season ahead of us. And excellence to preparation, professionalism in and out of the building. I think all those things add up, and I think we're somewhere around the mid-50s in terms of Buckeyes in the NFL right now. Maybe there's other teams that have more, but the guys that we have, just really proud of what they've done. And you see some of the guys, that have been in the NFL now going on, a decade, and then you have some of these new guys who are really excited about making a difference. But the feedback we get from our players is that when they get to these clubs, they're ready to go because of the structure here, how we do things. The stage isn't too big, but just also understanding the offensive scheme, the defensive scheme. You're going to be in an NFL style offense, defense, and special teams when you're here at Ohio State. So, and you're going to be coached that way. So all those things add up to guys doing well once they're there. And when you talk to NFL personnel, they know what they're getting when a Buckeye goes on their team. And we've just got so much great feedback about our players year in and year out.
I got time for just a couple more. We'll go to Steve and Means.
Quarterback battle #1 team in the country week 1. You're trying to find new leaders. There's just a lot of new, and because of that, maybe it wasn't easy to find an offensive identity when you're focused on all of those things. You're talking about you want to see a little bit more aggressive. Do you almost, regardless of who the opponents are the next 2 weeks, from Hartline, from Julian, do you want to see a level of aggression from them and maybe how they approach these next 2 games, even if it, whatever, regardless of what the score is going to be, just so you can start to build whatever this team is going to look like with Hartline as the play caller and Julian Sand as your starting quarterback?
Yeah, I think we all want to be explosive, and we need to create more explosive plays. But when you really look at the way the game played out, when we didn't convert the 3rd and 4th down at midfield, then we get pinned inside the 10-yard line. And if we're not, in those moments, going to be aggressive down there, it's a long road to score a touchdown all the way down the field when you have a young quarterback where, you're pretty much trying to keep the ball in his hand for a short period of time or trying to run vertically against a team that has very good team speed going sideline to sideline. And so we found ourselves backed up a lot. One time on a 1-yard line, and when you're in those moments, you have to be very, very careful with the football. And you get a little limited in what you can do with this type of defense, with this type of quarterback, with everything going into play. Then you look at, sort of how methodically we played the game. I think we only had 4 possessions in the first half. I mean, possessions were limited. You add all those things up together, I mean, that's what you got when you have a couple early drops. We did have a penalty, and then there you go. Late in the game, we had one drive where, we on purpose wanted to eat up time. I think we ate 4 minutes off the clock, got a first down. We were really moving really slow there. So that's really what played into the game. Now, like you said, moving forward, yeah, we know we have to be more explosive. Yeah, we need to get the ball out in space and do those types of things. But that's all part of the journey with this group. And the first goal was just win the game and find a way to do it.
We've got time for 2 more. We'll go to front row, Julie Kaufman.
What led ultimately to Phil Daniels getting the start over Ethan there at right tackle? What did he do to show you that he could start over Ethan, and then is that plan moving forward?
I think Phil coming out of the game, and Austin, both really the first starts here, playing against a really talented edge rush guys and Simmons and Moore and the guys that they have, it was good. To answer your question, it was consistency. Yeah, I think Phil plays with an edge, and he's been very, very consistent at that position. Ethan is still going to be an important part of our front, and right now, he's kind of swinging between right guard and right tackle, and so he'll continue to play, and we'll keep working through those things. But in this game, we thought that gave us the best chance to win.
Brian, it seemed like Matt did some different things with his front than maybe you guys had done in the past couple of years. When you, from an offensive perspective or offensive play call perspective, when you already have to come on the field and say, where's takedowns? When you can also mix in a guy like Arvell who did so much, how much more difficult does that make it for quarterbacks and offensive coordinators to know what you guys are doing on the front?
Well, those 2 guys in particular that you mentioned both have versatility. Arvell, but you look at Sonny, then you look at Caleb, and you see guys who can do multiple things. Then it becomes harder to recognize how you're being attacked. And I thought Texas did a nice job, with some of their guys and what they were doing, very similar. But yeah, the more versatility you have, then the harder it is to peg down what exactly is going on in that play. And I think our guys take a lot of pride in being able to disguise looks pre-snap and then give different looks post-snap, which again is all good, but you got to execute them. And the coverage and rush have to work together. I thought the coverage was very good. There were some things we got to get better at, but I thought we did a nice job of for the most part keeping the quarterback in the pocket and not letting him just get out of there. He did have a couple, but you didn't just see wild rush lanes, and that's unselfish as well because you did see some drop 8 where you saw some guys in coverage. They're not in that moment rushing the quarterback, and then you saw some guys push the pocket and sort of hold their lanes as opposed to just wildly running up the field after the quarterback. That was all part of the game plan. And so, when you're unselfish and you're not worried about your statistics, man, you can play great team defense. But that takes a bunch of buy-in from everybody. And so we're going to need that moving forward based on what the game plan is going to be.
All right, Coach, thank you.
All right, guys, thanks. Yep.